Okay, well, it's 7 o'clock, so open the first, as far as I know, virtual Zoom meeting of the Kenmore Planning Commission. First item is citizen comments, and according to Maura, we have not gotten any citizen comments up to this point. Are there any last-minute citizen comments, Maura, that you can
There
see?
are no attendees currently, so no citizen comments.
Okay, well, we will move on from that then and go to the approval of the March 3rd, 2020 Planning Commission meeting minutes, if anybody can remember back that far. Do I hear a motion about those minutes?
I move we approve the minutes for March 3rd, 2020.
I'll second.
Okay, any discussion on the minutes? Okay, hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Say nay. Okay, minutes unanimously. Next item is the staff memo and some other aspects. So invite Lori and Debbie to take it over from here.
Oh, hang on a minute. Here we are. So, good evening, Planning Commission. It's good to see you all, if only virtually. And so we're not anticipating a very long meeting tonight. This is just to kind of refresh your memory on what you were working on earlier this year, which seems a lifetime ago. I'm sure it does. So Laurie can give you an update, and that is the update on the park recreation open space element of the comprehensive plan. And this is so that you will then be prepared for the public hearing, which will be at your next meeting. And as you know, the comp plan is typically only amended once a year, so your recommendations will be moving forward to council later this year, along with any other comprehensive plan amendments. The other thing that we'll be doing is we'll be giving council an update at the July 13th meeting, status update on the docket. Because we've lost 3 months due to COVID, we need to sort of adjust the work program. So that's what we're doing with council on the 13th, but we can kind of follow up with that later. So I'm going to turn it over to Laurie, who you can see is not really sitting in the council chambers, although it looks like she is, can give you a refresher on the prose element. Take it away, Laurie.
Okay, actually I was going to start with the docket information, if that's okay with the commission. And so as Debbie mentioned, on the 13th, we are moving forward to the City Council to ask them to adjust the docket given our 3-month hiatus here. And so I wanted just briefly to run down the status of the items that were on your docket and then tell you what we are proposing. So as Debbie said, in a minute, I'll go over the prose plan, parks element, translation. We put that first on your docket because we thought it would be so timely right after you had just done the prose plan. Now it's 6 months later anyway. But so the plan would be, as Debbie said, that you would hold your public hearing, a virtual public hearing, the first one, at your next meeting. And then that would, you wouldn't have your joint meeting with the council after that. We would save that joint meeting until later in the fall when other potential comprehensive plan amendments come forward. Then the other things on your docket, there were 2 housing strategy plan ideas. One was a review process for affordable housing projects. And that project was to look at expedited ways to handle public and nonprofit affordable housing projects to make it easier, hopefully, for them to get through the permit process. And in the course of that discussion, the council also added consideration of private requests to that program. And so that project we would hope to bring forward to you next. And the reason for that is because this project was a private request, a private citizen request, and we usually finish those off the year of the request. So this person made his request last fall to be added to the 2020 docket, so it's timely to pick that up now and finish it before the end of the year. The other plan from the housing.
Lori, a question before.
Yeah. I'm ready.
Is this specific to this individual project, or is it opening it up to a policy in general for this type of project?
It's opening it up generally for this type of project. And the applicant initially had wanted to have a land use map change it's an affordable senior project. And we had recommended to the council that they not take that up as a map change. We're just in a year and a half going to be starting on our next comprehensive plan overall update, which would look at land use generally. So it didn't seem appropriate to pick up this one piece and start looking at it in this context. But there would be a potential opportunity for this person to pursue what they're interested in through another kind of a process. Maybe it's a development agreement or another way to modify development standards, modify the process to make it easier for this kind of a valuable affordable housing project to move ahead. Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. So we'd be reviewing a policy change, not a specific project.
That is correct. That is correct. So the other item from the housing strategy plan, you'll remember, was the missing middle. And in March, we were anticipating a joint meeting with the city council to kind of talk about the general framework for that project. What was the council expecting? We now think that that meeting will be held in the fall, probably September or October, something like that. And that will set the framework for this project, which may actually not start until the end of the year. You're pretty well booked with the affordable housing review process, and then it would continue on into 2021. And then the last item on your docket, and we weren't sure we would get to this in 2020 anyway, but it was the economic development incentives for office development. So we're recommending that that be deferred to next year's docket or beyond, depending on how the council wishes to pursue it. So this is what we're recommending to the council. And in anticipation that they will move forward in this way, we are also taking to them on the 13th a series of questions about this affordable housing review process to try to get some general feedback that would help you all as you're thinking about the project. So we've asked them a series of questions. We're not asking for policy direction. We're just saying, what are your general thoughts about some of these concepts that we can bring forward to the Planning Commission to help them begin their process of considering possibilities here. So that will occur on the 13th as well. So that's kind of what we're proposing for the revised docket. And unless you have questions, I'll move on to the pros plan.
Yeah, Laura, just a brief question. It may be too early to know. The meeting with the council is also likely to be virtual at this point. Do you have any more? I guess none of us know exactly how things are going to unfold, but what's the latest on sort of in-person meetings?
Well, now that's a good question. Maybe Debbie can take that one.
I think in terms of the phases, I doubt whether there would be in-person meetings to at least phase 3, if not later. So I don't know. I think we're in phase 2 right now. And I think there's indications that the governor is going to keep this phase for King County at least for a few more weeks. So the council has only 2 more meetings in July, and then they take a break in August. So whether there will be allowance in September or not is too far ahead to know, Mark.
That's the way it is right now. We can't predict too far ahead. So okay, just wonder what the latest was. So thank you.
Okay. All right, so the pros plan, they're really, I keep calling it the pros plan. This is the parks element of the comprehensive plan based on the pros plan that you reviewed last year and that the City Council adopted in February. So the parks element is a chapter in the comprehensive plan, and it goes in tandem with the capital facilities element, which identifies the short, mid, and long range parks projects. And as you'll recall, at your meeting in March, we had taken the pros plan and we kind of blown it apart, but kept the basics and put it back together in the format of a comprehensive plan element. So you looked at that on March 3rd, and the changes, the more significant changes were highlighted in red in the parks element. And so then at that meeting, you actually made a motion and approved this preliminary draft, which is to be the subject of the public hearing on the 21st. So during that review, you had a couple of questions. And you also had some suggestions for changes. Your changes have been incorporated. And so hopefully you saw those. If you were to look at the minutes and look at the changes, we think we captured all of those. And then the questions, you had one question about, Mark Orenshaw, I think this was your question. What is the difference between a path, hiking trail, and paved trail? We didn't know at the meeting because the person who originated the pros plan that made those distinctions had developed the criteria. So in your memo that accompanied your materials this week, we defined path, hiking trail, and paved trail, and then we asked the consultant and Maureen Kalaisi, who's the parks program manager, I guess, for the pros plan, to take a look at the table. And she confirmed that the table as prepared was accurate using these definitions. So it had to do, I think, mostly between the difference between a path and a hiking trail. I mean, it's pretty clear what a paved trail is. But both the path and the hiking trail could be like a gravel surface. And so that's where the distinction was. And hopefully that answered the question.
Yeah, I saw that. Thank you.
You're welcome. Then there was a second question actually from the pros plan. This, as you know, was already adopted, but it was an informational question for a figure 10, comparison of the number of people for every park and park acres in the city. And the question was, why does the number of people per park decrease? So here we're getting more parks, presumably, but it looks, the number of people served looks like it's being reduced. In fact, I went back and looked at this, and the number of people per park is calculated by dividing the number of parks by the population. So as we add more parks to our total number of parks, then the number of people using an individual park goes down. So if you think if you had 10 parks and you had 100 people, you would have 10 people potentially per park. But if you had 15 parks and 100 people, you would have fewer people at each park. Does that make sense? I'm looking for nodding heads, but maybe if you have questions, please stop me. Anyway, so those were the two questions that were raised, and hopefully we answered those. And so unless you had additional questions, you've already taken your action on the item, and we would just be preparing to bring it back, as I said, on the 21st for a virtual public hearing. We would see how that goes. Any questions?
And so then we would, after the public hearing, what's the next step from that? Can you?
So the next
Define this.
step would be, unless you want to make changes, for example, if you hold a public hearing and there's public comment that makes you think we should make changes, then you would revise your recommended draft. And, you know, if it were a lot of people, you could do it at the next meeting. It's unlikely, I think, given the extensive involvement for the PROS plan. There's not a lot of new information here. And I would be very surprised if there was a large number of people coming to comment about the parks element. But if there were, you could talk about it, debate it, decide whether you need another meeting to think about it. If there aren't many people, you may be able to move from your preliminary recommendation to your final recommendation on the 21st. And then it will just be held until we get the rest of the comp plan amendments toward the end of the year, at which point you would present that to the city council.
Okay. Any questions or comments from fellow commissioners? It's so hard to tell on virtual exactly what people are thinking, but
I just have one question. Can you guys hear me?
Uh-huh.
yes.
Okay. In the early part of the document, there's a strike through where it had a description that said over 80% of this parkland of the existing park system is forested, wetland, or natural systems.
Mm-hmm.
And that was excluded or crossed out. Can you tell me why?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, because that concept was moved up earlier into an earlier paragraph.
Okay. Into the introduction.
So, let me see where it is exactly.
It's just talking about the geography and there's the existing park system.
Right,
it's under existing conditions.
It was.
Is it because it's kind of fleshed out a little bit more in that paragraph above it?
Correct. So if you
Okay.
look in existing park system, that's where the over 80% information is. But in the paragraph right above, it says, in fact, of the 146 total acres, 120 acres are natural areas. So it was just a different way to phrase it. And it felt a little bit more explanatory of the system as a whole, rather than of just the park system.
Okay.
So that's the reason for the
being numbers oriented. It was like,
Mm-hmm.
wow, 80% of our park system is just natural.
Mm-hmm.
and could include wetlands, but it also could mean that it's not really developed for people use, which is okay. But that was something that, you know, comes up in the PROS plan later as part of the survey, that people want programming.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, our antidote to that, or our mandate from the survey of our citizens, is they want to have accessible places to go work out or to participate in programmed activities, but forested areas, wetlands, streams, and other natural environments don't really make that possible. I mean, I love that we have this kind of park system. It's pretty remarkable because we sort of inherited a lot of it, but that was just, I wondered why we crossed out that 80% of our park system is in this form that isn't really, it's natural, which is good. But I just wondered why we crossed it out. But I see now why. You just phrased it in a different way.
Correct. And if your fellow commissioners would want to do this, again, there was an action taken at the last meeting, But I could easily put that 80% in. 120 divided by 146, that's like 82%.
Yeah.
So I could say, in fact, of the 146 total acres of city-owned parkland, 120 acres, in parentheses, more than 80%, in parentheses, are natural areas. There's no reason it can't. It was
kind of redundant. It seemed redundant to repeat
Yeah.
it, but I would like to recommend that you do that, because that's an identifying quantitative number that
Yeah,
people might be able to relate to.
So the commission needs to take action on that, since the commission took action at the last meeting.
Okay. Well, I'd like to make a motion that we word the 80% number in the statement in the paragraph above as Lori recommended. Is there
Right,
any?
it's on page 7-2 if you want to
Yeah.
look at it.
Okay.
Okay, well, I guess we have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, motion and second. Any discussion on the motion? All right, let's have a vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed, say nay.
Nay.
Nay. So the motion passes. I didn't hear everybody's, but I believe that's 6-1.
Could we clarify who was the nay vote? It might be helpful to do roll call votes for, first of all, for folks on the phone, if there were any, but also
Okay.
because we can't tell who was the nay vote, and we need that for the minutes.
Yeah, it was Commissioner Lutzis. So.
Oh, okay. All right.
Also, just sorry to jump in here. When we do motions, I know we don't like to, all of us don't like to show our faces the whole time, but it might be helpful to show our faces for the motions as well. So I can see, we could raise hands in addition to a verbal response would help me see that everyone is responding and know who's responding on which side.
Okay, thank you. So are we all set with that particular, do we need to do anything different with that motion?
I would like to have the motion kind of read or communicated again, just so I'm sure what we're voting on.
So I maybe can help with this. In the parks element on that page 7-2, there's a description of the existing park system. And in the very first couple of sentences, it talks about the city of Kenmore has 13 parks, recreation, and open space facilities totaling over 146 acres of parkland. And then there was another sentence that said over 80% of this parkland is forested, wetlands, or natural systems. And in the draft, that sentence was removed, and the concept was moved to the previous paragraph, which is titled Geography. And so a sentence was added in that. It says so this is a pre-existing sentence. Many of the city's existing parks are located beside or contain a creek, river, or freshwater shoreline, wetlands, or significant forested areas. In fact, of the 146 total acres of city-owned parkland, 120 acres are natural areas, forests, wetlands, streams, and other natural environments. And Carol's motion was to add the notion that 120 of 146 acres is 80%, is more than 80%, to that phrase. So it would now read, in fact, of the 146 total acres of city-owned parkland, 120 acres, then in parens, it would say more than 80%, in parens, are natural areas. So it's just retaining, I think Carol's perspective was that having the 80% is more impactful than saying 126 and 140, because then you have to do the math in your head, and it's, kind of hard to do that.
I have a follow-up question.
So if we approve this motion, what does that mean since we've already approved this element at the last meeting? Would we have to approve this again?
So when you approved it at the last meeting, that was your preliminary approval to give us the authority to send it out to the public for the public hearing. So you have not formally approved the element, and you won't do that until after the public hearing when you have a chance to see if any citizens have anything to contribute.
But there's nothing that we need to change except to announce this, if we approve it, this other change at the beginning of the public hearing next meeting?
Yeah, right. And in fact, I can already change it, for example, on the website and places where people might go to review the materials. We can make that change immediately.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So are we then good? Do we need to, we don't need to revote, do we?
No.
Okay.
No. So unless there are more questions, those were the two items that we were hoping to cover tonight.
Yeah.
Oh, excuse me. On that last one, hearing that it clarified what we were motioning on, I thought it was, I misinterpreted that. And so I would change my vote to yay, but it doesn't, at this point, that's all right. You can keep my vote the way it is.
Okay.
It won't change anything, but thank you for the
Right.
clarification. It really
Right.
helped.
Good.
Nathan, be careful. Carol makes a list of everybody that doesn't support her motion.
Yeah.
No, actually, I don't. I love that you asked that question because that's what this forum is about. So
Yep. Ask them
thank you
questions.
for allowing me to ask that question. And I do think it is more impactful, especially when you think about the things we're going to talk about all the way through the rest of the draft. And it just sets a tone for wanting to preserve the park system that we have, acknowledging that we know what the citizens of our community want. And to accomplish that, we need to always be in the mode of looking for ways of acquiring more properties. And we have a pattern of doing that. So I just think this helps to clarify that we're still in a very natural setting and we're very lucky for that. But based on the survey material and why we're putting this forward to the council, the citizens that we represent and want to, meet the needs of our community had different ideas about what those parks should be doing. And I just think we're doing a tremendous job for the size of city we are and the resources that we have available. And it just demonstrates that we know what we have and we can communicate that well in many different ways to our community so they can participate. So that's all I have to say.
Good addition there, Carol. Thank you for sharing that. I had one, I don't know if it's a question or a thought, and that had to do with the overlay maps on 7-11 and 7-12, where it shows the, let me scroll down to that. Shows the, one is on the neighborhood parks on 7-11, and then on the, I think it's the community, let's see.
Community parks.
Community parks on 7-12, and
Correct.
I take it that the sort of yellowish bubbles around each one of those, what exactly does that signify again?
That is, and it's in parens after the description, but it's the half-mile service area or about a 10-minute walk.
Okay.
So
my oh, I'm sorry. So what I was wondering is we have two different ones for neighborhood and community, and I know we have some, the linear parks and the regional facilities as well. And I think we have an aspirational goal, if I recall. I think it's later in the document about having every resident be within. It's a 10-minute walk, right, of a park facility. Did I read that correctly?
Yeah, I think so.
So I guess what I was wondering, if there might be a way to kind of graphically or visually represent all the parks in the city and show the areas that are within 10 minutes walk and actually those that aren't. So it's kind of, instead of having it over several different maps, there's one sort of general map that specifies, you know, these are the areas that are within 10 minutes and these are the areas that aren't. Is that feasible? In other words, instead of doing, you know, several maps, or maybe in addition having one sort of broad one that has all of the parks with that particular metric in place. So
I have a couple thoughts, and hopefully Debbie can help me out here. So we certainly don't want to change, you know, we want consistency between the pros plan and the parks element. That's really important. So we can always do another map, but here is my concern. There was discussion in front of the council when they adopted the pros plan about what exactly was meant by that 10-minute walk shed. And there was some concern expressed. It was sort of about that notion of doing the opposite map, of showing where the gaps were. And at least one, if not more, council members were saying, we don't want to show that map because we don't want to foreshadow where where we would be buying parks to that degree. So that we're suddenly have a map and it's like there's one parcel that is not covered by yellow, and so of course we're going to go for that parcel. Debbie, do you remember that? I'm actually not sure you were at that meeting. If the truth be told.
I don't think I do. I remember you telling me about that meeting. I think the other than that, there's sort of the logistics of trying to put everything on one map gets super cluttered to try and read as well. So that was another reason is why it was sort of divided up, because if you add in all the regional stuff, then you don't really have that many gaps. So
right.
One reason why it was split out the way that it is. So I think what the staff are dancing around at this point is we might be able to figure out another map, but I don't know how much additional benefit or bang for your buck you would get from doing that.
From that, okay. Well, I appreciate those. I actually forgotten about the council members' concerns about that. I guess I was trying to figure out a way where we could show people. Yeah, it would reveal, I guess, where the gaps are. I guess that's really the point of it. But since it was kind of called out as an aspirational goal, I guess we'll have to make do with, you know, the ones we have, and people who are in those sort of gap areas. I guess we'll see it in you know, one of these or other of these maps. So if it's too much trouble, it's not a priority. So that's all I had.
I've got two small things, if we have a moment.
Yep.
Thank you for recognizing me, Chairman. On Lori, page 7-10, similar to where Mark was just referring.
Right.
In the section towards the bottom, talking about non-Kenmore owned, but still within city limits parkland. St. Edward State Park, you have listed as 316 acres. I think the number this year is 326.
So this is something we should check, because this was probably put together before that acquisition through the so this number may be an older number and not include the seminary land addition.
Right. I think that's the difference. Yeah, and I'm looking at the.
I'm happy to make that change. It may be that I need to make it as a footnote, and I'll tell you why. Because I think these numbers roll through in several different places where we talk about how much acreage there is. Remember all those numbers about in fact, the one we just talked about, how many parks there are, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
So I would prefer, rather than have a different set of numbers in the parks element from the pros plan, to just put a footnote on this chart that says, and I'll confirm this, that this number does not include the 10-acre parcel deeded to Washington State Parks by the Daniels group, or however it needs to be phrased.
Right.
If the commission is wanting to do that.
I think it's a good idea since we're being super specific on acreage. That's a pretty big chunk.
Okay.
I think a footnote is fine.
So you need to have your fellow commissioners agree with your change, just as Carol did with her change, since you had already voted on it, and then I can add the footnote.
Okay. So we need a motion, right?
Right.
Okay.
I'll make a motion in just a second, though. Do we cover anywhere feet of shoreline? Because I think that has, for the exact same reason, changed as well. I think the McDonald land exchange also included shoreline footage.
Oh, right. Yeah, it probably, I'm not sure that there's a reference, but I certainly could double check that. It's more likely in the shoreline element where there's an acreage description, but I'm happy to check that.
Only if it's relevant to this thing that we're preparing for the public hearing. Just to mention that, because I think they updated the state parks website after that purchase with new values for both.
Okay.
Anyway, I'll make a motion that we add a footnote, page 7-2, to say that current acreage of St. Edward State Park is whatever you confirm it to be. I believe it to be 326.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second?
I will second that.
All right, and a motion and second. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, hearing none, we will proceed to voting. So why don't we vote by saying whoever's in favor, say aye, and also raise your hand so Maura can. So whoever's in favor, say aye, raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, say nay, and turn your thumbs down if we can see you. So I guess that's okay. I guess we have a unanimous vote on that motion.
Okay.
And I had one other item I wanted to ask a question about. I hope it results in a motion and a vote because that was really fun. This is towards the very end, I think second to last page, which might be considered the penultimate page. 11-2 perhaps? Yeah, 11-2. Talking about the midterm future project budgeting. We have a dog off-leash area in the middle of the page at $739,000. And I know these are estimates for future purchases and future updates, and we can't be super specific, but that seems like a very kind of specific number. Can you remind me how we reached $739,000 as a budget item for an off-leash dog park?
I probably cannot tell you. The way the park estimates were done, I think, were to look at similar facilities in other locations, and then to sort of look at best practices for how much, for example, a dog park might cost. But beyond that, I truly don't know. I wasn't involved in these calculations. So unless Debbie has more to add, we would have to go back to the consultant and Maureen and say, where did these numbers come from?
That's exactly right. I couldn't tell you which dog parks, but it was probably looking at dog parks in other cities, such as Shoreline, for example, has recently added dog parks. So it was looking at sort of a reasonable size dog park, nothing like sort of Marymore off-leash area, more of a small permanent dog park.
And do you think that also includes acquisition cost of the land?
That I would have to confirm. It would probably be a small dog park if that was an acquisition as well as improvement for $700,000 would be my guess. But we can confirm that.
That would be great.
It doesn't show in the acquisition section. There's an acquisition and a development section in that chart. Wouldn't it be under acquisition if they were thinking they needed to purchase the land?
We can let's go back. I feel like I'm guessing, and I never like to guess. And being as this has been a while since I've thought about how that was, because it's probably been more than 18 months ago. Can we get back to you on that, Commissioner Mulcair and Greathouse, to confirm how that number was calculated and confirm whether it does or does not consider acquisition, and if acquisition is considered in another category?
That would be great. Yeah, because if it includes acquisition, I think that's a great buy, right? At current land, that's about 1/8 of an acre. But if it doesn't include acquisition, boy, that's going to be a hell of a dog park, right? For $750,000, because they mostly involve fencing, a garbage can, and a pet bag dispensary. Anyway, that'd be great to follow up on later.
I have a note.
Thanks. By the way, if you haven't seen, downtown Bothell put their temporary dog park back a couple of weeks ago. They had taken it down for a while, and now it's back.
Okay.
That's it for me, Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Mulcair, Vice Chair Mulcair. Anybody else have any questions or comments or thoughts on this draft? Again, I think as Lori indicated, if we do want to make further changes, we still have that option, correct, Lori, before we actually do the final option.
Yep.
So Commissioner Lutzis, go ahead.
This is just a clarifying question. I can't remember if we already discussed this, but it's more about the definition back in attachment 1 of community parks and neighborhood parks. Reading through it again a second time, it stood out to me that there's a lot of kind of subjective or vague language, like under community park, how it says usually contains unique features. First of all, usually, and second, unique. I feel like those are somewhat subjective as to who is viewing that. And I mean, so far, I don't have a tremendous issue with this. I agree with what's been agreed upon so far, but I just feel like it could cause some issues with maybe some other people or later on when defining types of parks, especially maybe in the city council realm, if they're looking at what kind of parks they have. If one feels that one park has more unique features over another park, I don't know if it's as clear. Again, we may have discussed this a while back, but that was several months ago, and I don't remember right now. But I think it was under community and neighborhood parks, just more specification on differentiating the two.
I can totally appreciate that. But I think it's water under the bridge. I'm sorry to say that.
No, that's totally fine.
So you recommended, the Planning Commission and the City Council adopted the Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Plan that has these exact definitions in it. So I think it would be super awkward to change these classifications now in the element when what we're trying to do is sync these two things up. That's my perspective. It's your recommendation. You can do what you want, but my recommendation would be not to go down that path.
And that makes total sense, and that's all right with me. It was just something that stood out to me and that I had a question about.
Right. I'm always impressed by how thoroughly you read all these many pages, everyone. That's good.
Okay, well, anybody else have any, again, questions or comments at this point for Lori or Debbie on anything that we've discussed?
This is more about moving into our schedule, we have our public hearing at our next meeting. Do we have meetings scheduled for the month of August?
Yes.
We
Okay.
were anticipating so for two reasons. One is because we need to catch up a little bit from the 3 months where you weren't meeting.
Okay.
So we were anticipating you would meet in August, and I guess we would be retaining the first and third Tuesdays. So understanding that it is August and people may have out of town things planned or not be available for other reasons, just let us know if you're not available for those meetings.
And then we don't really know when we'll move into phase 3, but if we move into phase 3, do you know if we can meet in the city hall? We don't really know that yet.
I think I'm going to have to say hold tight on that.
Okay. I'm fine. I learned how to do Zoom. There you go.
Learning opportunity, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, well, Lori and Debbie, do you have anything more for us tonight to cover?
I don't.
Okay, anything else for the good of the order from fellow commissioners they want to bring up? Great, okay, well, this meeting is adjourned and we'll see you virtually in a couple of weeks. Thank you.
Sounds
Thanks.
good.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Good night.